was good that it requires like zoning updates because that's been missing from a couple other moratoria we've seen.
All right, I'm going to start the meeting. It's 5:30. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'll start with a roll call. I'm here. Ms. Holman?
Present.
Mr. Simeon?
Here.
Mr. Timonier?
Here.
Ms. Milberg is absent, and we have Catherine Colgren here today, and our guest, Molly Bryden, and she is going to start. She's from Policy Matters Ohio, and data center impacts are the discussion. So you can take it away, Molly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm Molly Bryden, the Climate and Sustainability Researcher with Policy Matters Ohio, and we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization working to build a more vibrant, equitable, inclusive, and sustainable Ohio. We have been digging into the data center issue quite a bit recently. Our first major report on data center development in Ohio focused on the costly state subsidies for data center companies, which I'll get into a bit down the road. But our first foray into this issue at the local level was when we responded to a request from a local resident in Wilmington that was concerned about a harmful property tax abatement deal between the Wilmington City Council and an Amazon data center operator. So we started, in response to that, building out our broader project around data centers to pull in relevant partners to look at this issue and see how we could layer efforts just because of how quickly the landscape is developing. And we want to be able to provide the support to local communities at scale. We also have a range of data center resources available at the website is listed there, but we've been putting out a number of policy platforms, policy briefs, and testimony in response to some of the state and local legislation that's been moving in response to the data center boom. So our platform for responsible data center development centers around limiting or eliminating state and local taxpayer subsidies, upholding community benefits, and establishing strong guardrails around development, maintaining good jobs and labor standards on the construction projects and also during the operations and maintenance of these facilities, and increasing democracy and transparency mechanisms at both the state and local level, while also supporting energy affordability and environmental protections, considering all of the potential harms that could be produced from irresponsible data center development decisions. So the state offers a sales tax exemption on the building equipment materials that go into these construction projects. Originally, that exemption was expected to cost the state between $120 million to just over $140 million per year, which is still a substantial amount of foregone revenue, but I'm sure many have seen the recent news that this sales tax exemption ended up costing the state around $555 million in 2024, and then that amount soared to $1.6 billion in 2025. And just to put that into context, the Fair School Funding Plan, which is the broad plan to fairly fund all of Ohio's public schools, would have cost the state around $1.4 billion per year. So the state could have paid for to fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan and then some, had it not given away so much in state tax revenue to data center companies, which represent some of the wealthiest corporations in the world. So one of our key priorities with this work is to protect state and local revenue by eliminating or limiting state subsidies or state or local taxpayer subsidies for data center operators, especially when a key Microsoft executive responsible for data center development across North America said himself that he can't think of a site selection or placement decision that was decided on a set of tax incentives. This is kind of a more contentious debate where a lot of companies are claiming that the tax incentives do make a meaningful difference, but in reality, we know that all of these tech companies are kind of in a race to be the first to build out their AI infrastructure, which is really powering this development or growth that we're seeing across the country. And so I think that we should be cautious when we're offering state or locally generated revenue that could be going to key programs and services to serve the broader community to this wealthy industry that we know is building these facilities regardless of the incentives that they'll receive. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of local tax abatement agreements between local governments and data center companies, which further undercuts promises of gains and the arguments for the economic growth that can be produced by data centers. We're also seeing that there are some loopholes embedded in these agreements. Like, we've reviewed a couple community reinvestment area agreements between Amazon and a couple different local governments across the state that include essentially copy-paste language that doesn't offer any guardrails or clawbacks if the company were to fail to make good on its commitments to job creation that are decided by the contract. There are also other loopholes where companies will kind of stagger the construction of these facilities so that they'll be able to reap the benefits of local property tax abatements for longer than the original term that's laid out in the agreement. We're seeing 15 to 30-year agreements at the local level. Also, a lot of the companies are represented by shell companies, which kind of calls into question potential concerns about all the unknowns around AI development, just considering how quickly things are evolving. What happens, who's going to cover the infrastructure costs if the AI bubble bursts, if the company decides to cease operations in a state, all of the other unknowns that we can't really anticipate given the pace of this growth in Ohio and across a lot of other states in the US. I'm sure many people have seen that Ohio is kind of leading the country in data center, in both existing and planned data centers. I think we're around sixth out of the 50 US states. It kind of wavers a bit, but we've been holding strong in the top 10 for existing and planned facilities. So these are all of the data center facilities in Ohio. What people are most concerned about are these hyperscalers or AI data centers that are really proliferating across the state. And these are massive facilities that consume enough power to power an entire city, or small cities. For example, a 100 megawatt data center consumes about the same amount of electricity as around 70,000 Ohio households. So we have been hearing from a lot of residents and concerned local officials who are trying to identify ways to navigate the AI boom at the local level. The leading concerns that we've heard from these groups are water. That quickly emerged as a front runner. So data centers' impacts on water quality and availability, air quality and air pollution, energy affordability and ratepayer protections, public health, taxes and subsidies, noise pollution, a whole host of issues. The concerns about the potential externalities associated with data center development are really pretty expansive across the board. And I think what's really emerged as a through line from what we've been hearing from organizers that are kind of building out these community coalitions in opposition to harmful deals is the lack of transparency that goes into these decisions at the local level. A lot of local officials are entering into non-disclosure agreements or NDAs with developers, making decisions behind closed doors until it's essentially too late for the surrounding community to have a meaningful input on this important economic development decision that has wide-ranging long-term impacts for host communities. So one of our other policy priorities is to hold the data center industry accountable by prohibiting or limiting NDAs between data centers and local and state economic development entities like the Department of Development. If we were to prohibit NDAs between developers and local officials, we think that the limits should be kind of applied or distributed uniformly across all localities instead of potentially risking, threatening home rule protections that most cities and like some limited home rule townships have. And so increasing transparency and reporting requirements around data center development is incredibly important because of all its potential impacts. There's been a lot of concern growing around a potential energy supply shortfall in PJM's region, which is the grid operator that serves Ohio, 12 other states, and DC. So we can't link the recent increase to data center development alone, but over the past 10 years or so, the average demand among commercial ratepayers increased by around 24%, while residential demand stayed relatively flat and ultimately decreased a bit. And at the same time, Ohio ratepayers, residential ratepayers in Ohio, saw their average electricity bill increase by about 35%. So I think while utility accountability is also a major component and an important priority that we should have to protect everyday ratepayers from the growing demand that's being driven by data centers, it's important to note that we haven't seen the real impacts of like the full scope of load growth that we're anticipating, like the sheer magnitude of load requests that are being made by data center companies, which I can explain a bit with this slide, really implicates potential like long-term rate hikes moving forward without robust ratepayer protections and just meaningful policy change and utility reform to be able to center the needs of everyday Ohio communities over these energy-intensive and resource-intensive facilities. So something that also can link to our rising utility costs is the recent increase in supplemental transmission spending. So these projects are required for, they're targeted to local reliability needs rather than satisfying federal or regional reliability standards. If you look through some meeting documents from PJM's Transmission Expansion Advisory Committee, you can link a lot of the customer service requests that are driving at least some of the spending, some of the supplemental transmission spending that we're seeing, and link them directly back to specific data center facilities that are being planned in various areas of the state. And transmission costs are spread across our utility's entire rate base, so that means without meaningful reform and better rate designs that set up stronger ratepayer protections, then everyday Ohioans could be left with the bill for the massive infrastructure needs of data centers that are being planned across the state. This is showing the anticipated load requests made in AEP's service area, shared during the Transmission Expansion Advisory Committee meetings. The anticipated load growth in AEP's region is expected to surpass 12,000 megawatts or 12 gigawatts, which is more electricity than all residential ratepayers in Ohio consume in a year combined. These projects might not all materialize because of data center developers tend to shop around for more favorable regulatory landscapes. So they might submit duplicative load requests to different utilities to see where they could get a better deal. And that's also a component that could be overinflating the projected load growth and also being passed on to other customers. But overall, this is creating an unprecedented increase in electricity demand, and we don't have the adequate rate structures in place to ensure that data centers are going to be paying their fair share, the full costs of their infrastructure needs. At the same time, we are seeing a push for behind-the-meter generation or on-site generation built to power data centers operations, which is entirely isolated from the regional transmission grid. These projects enjoy expedited permitting timelines and for major utility facilities that are owned or operated by a developer, and they're deemed automatically approved by the Ohio Power Siting Board within 60 days of the submission of a full application, unless they deny the project. This happened in Hilliard, where a 73 megawatt fuel cell facility was automatically approved by the Ohio Power Siting Board, and because the OPSB has sole authority over approving these projects, the local community and local officials had no say in whether it moved forward or not, or even what pollution control equipment they were using, or there's just, because of how these project approvals work, there's just very limited local authority. So I think that's a very important consideration for City Council and other local officials to understand that if they're approving a data center project, or if a data center project is being approved in their community, that could mean a natural gas plant going up in or near a residential area, which is where a lot of these facilities are being sited. And since House Bill 15 passed, which kind of streamlined the application and project approval for behind-the-meter facilities passed back in 2025, the OPSB has approved over 2,000 megawatts of natural gas-powered behind-the-meter generation, which is enough to power around 1.4 million homes, while an additional 3,000 megawatts of planned generation capacity associated with data center projects is currently under consideration with active applications as of July 2026. We are also starting to kind of tie this into the recent surge in fracking activity that we're seeing with the push to frack under Ohio's public parks, state parks, and now the Wayne National Forest. We can't exactly link this directly to the push for behind the meter, but it does kind of correspond with the timelines. Like we're seeing between 2023 and 2025, the average number of acres approved by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources between 2023 through 2025 was more than doubled in 2026. I don't know if, I always have a hard time explaining this, but so the amount of acres approved in 2026 is around double the annual average in the previous 3 years. And that was only in the first quarter of 2026. We're also looking at a similar or comparable amount of land under consideration to be opened up for oil and gas development that's been nominated by the ODNR. We've also, like I said, seen a lot of concerns about data centers' water impacts. So it's really hard to track the actual amount of water and where data centers are getting their water from because of the lack of transparency and the lack of reporting requirements that data centers are subject to. So overall, usage can vary a lot by the cooling method that they're using. They're running these computer facilities 24/7. They tend to heat up a lot, so they need to find a way to cool it down to make sure that there's no equipment failures and they can maintain reliability. But a hyperscale data center using an evaporative cooling system can use between 1 to 2 million gallons of water per day. There was also recent news, an analysis by the Columbus Dispatch found that Columbus area data centers used 1.2 billion gallons of water in between May of 2025 and 2026. So this has huge implications for water availability in areas that might not have as abundant water supply, like Ashtabula, like enjoying the great natural resources that we have available with the with Lake Erie so nearby. But even though there is a lot of water abundance available here, it's still important to consider the long-term impacts, considering the scope of growth that we're anticipating, and the idea that this isn't just a state issue or a local issue, it's a regional one when we're seeing a lot of data centers trying to draw water and impact the water quality across the Great Lakes regions. Data center companies are data center facilities often use harmful chemical refrigerants in their cooling systems known as PFAS or forever chemicals. There are also growing concerns about wastewater discharge management and water quality concerns for local surface waters. Also about the infrastructure needs, so the investment needed to support data centers' wastewater, water reclamation efforts that could be passed on to other customers, similar to the electricity concerns. And then another thing that makes it even harder to fully understand data centers, like comprehensive water impacts, is the indirect use for power generation, which represents around 70% of Great Lakes water use overall. This isn't tracked at all, so it's really hard to have a full picture of just how much of a drain data centers are putting on our natural resources. So to moderate some of the concerns about rising energy costs and the environmental impacts that data centers can have, we believe that the state and local officials should establish policies to strengthen protections for Ohio ratepayers, communities, and our natural resources while mitigating economic and environmental harms generated by the rapid expansion of resource-intensive data centers. Data center operators should be required to pay their fair share of grid upgrades and generation investment needed to connect them to the grid, while also financing the investment in public water and wastewater infrastructure. And we should be strengthening and advancing state and local policy mechanisms to mitigate environmental harms and to improve or shore up the reporting requirements that we have around this to fully understand what potential long-term impacts we could be facing without having access to like user-level data on a lot of these potential concerns. An important tool that could support better guardrails around data center development is a community benefits agreement, which is a legally binding tool that is negotiated between developers and community coalitions of residents, labor, and environmental advocates. It mostly just is a way to secure financial commitments from the company to make meaningful investment in the surrounding community. This could include anything that is super tailored to the respective community, including like residential weatherization programming, local biodiversity or resilience efforts, or other necessary infrastructure upgrades, while also setting requirements for like renewable sourcing, emission control equipment, and efficiency measures, along with strong labor standards. And finally, there's been a lot of discourse around data centers' long-term job impacts and their implications for long-term economic growth. I think it's important to note that data center development is generating a lot of good union construction jobs that's opening pathways to apprenticeship training programs that can connect Ohioans to high road careers in the union trades. There are also a bit more jobs involved in the operational phase of a data center, included in the maintenance, that aren't fully captured in some of the jobs reporting that they're required to do for their to receive the state incentive packages, because they're often subcontracted out. But despite the kind of missed jobs that we're not really fully talking about or aren't fully in the conversation, it still doesn't necessitate the massive amount of taxpayer revenue that we're giving out to these companies. And we should be ensuring that we're also supporting environmental protections and community guardrails in these development decisions, because the pros of the job creation don't outweigh all of the positive or negative externalities. But to support the work that's being done on these projects, and also to create high road pathways to the operations and maintenance jobs, a data center, the community benefits is a great way to maintain good jobs through the construction period and once the facility is operational. And then just going back to what we should be doing at the local level. So local officials should be considering opportunities to integrate stronger transparency and reporting requirements into the project application process or the permitting process by establishing pre- and post-approval transparency mechanisms for projections for electricity demand, whether they're going to be connected to the grid or using their own power generation, their impacts on water, a wastewater management plan, conservation plans, potential noise pollution from the facility, on-site emissions, and comprehensive environmental impact studies to provide a comprehensive view into what the potential impacts of a planned facility could be for the host community. The local officials should also require conditional use permits, which I believe in Ashtabula you do use conditional use permitting, but I think that it's important and can be effective to create a distinct class for data centers to implement zoning restrictions and a more robust conditional approval process that considers the unique traits of data center facilities, because this is such a new type of development that we're seeing. And as I've been saying, with all of the issues with transparency and the use of NDAs that's been undercutting local democracy, local officials should prioritize and require meaningful public engagement in local data center development decisions and leverage, if they do decide to welcome a data center to their community, they should be doing everything they can to leverage the industry's financial capacity to create long-term and meaningful community benefits for residents instead of subsidizing the industry at residents' expense. I go through a lot of state policy things, which I'm happy to share more about if there are any questions. I feel like there's a lot of this is a work in progress. There's a lot of energy building around this. Back in June, under substitute House Bill 646, which was an omnibus data center bill that would regulate certain elements of data center development. It definitely was a start and a step in the right direction towards where we need to be as a state, but I also just want to highlight that the state should be setting the floor instead of requiring local communities to kind of scramble to keep up with the pace of data center growth across the state. And without, a comprehensive or centralized source of information about these projects, it really puts a lot of burden on local communities to understand how they should be responding to planned projects and what opportunities they have to have a meaningful role in deciding whether these projects materialize and what it looks like when they do. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I kind of ran through a lot of that really quickly, but I appreciate the opportunity. I do want to say, with the moratorium, we've been seeing a lot of moratoria pop up that have been not as effective, and I think that if a moratorium is coupled with actual good policy that does set up some of these guardrails, it can be a very effective vehicle for regulating the industry and giving decision makers the time to consider what needs to be done and to create meaningful and measured policy and a more robust regulatory framework for data center development, because at the moment a lot of local communities don't have those measures in place, and we don't have the floor set by the state, but we're working on that.
Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to, no?
Have you seen any good examples of moratoriums with the proper policies and community benefits and all that stuff included?
So, not exact. I've seen examples of moratoria that set a specific time limit and say either the moratorium is set to end at this date, or once the zoning code is updated to appropriately address data center development or encompass data center facilities in the zoning code. I have seen some good model ordinances that have required some like rigorous reporting by a data center developer, both like pre-approval and post-approval. I'm trying to think. That model ordinance also required a public disclosure of information about electricity and water use, and also required the company to hold two public meetings. I think it was two public meetings before it could be approved. So I think that also, like the public meeting requirement improves local democracy around these decisions, gives residents a chance to learn more about what this project actually entails, and also affords more time to figure out how it should be like handled at the local level. I know that there's a community benefits agreement in place on a data center project in Pennsylvania, but that's the only one I'm aware of. At this time, it just ensured pretty strong financial commitments to various elements. Like it also it limited the type of generation technology that a data center could use, which we're still digging into this a bit because of the issue with the Ohio Power Siting Board's authority over major utility facilities. We're trying to see if there's a way to put restrictions on behind-the-meter generation facilities before the application is actually submitted to the OPSB, so before the data center itself is even approved. But I'm not a lawyer or a permitting expert, so I will definitely follow up once I get some more information from other groups that we're working with on this.
Do you have questions, Jim? Catherine, anything you want to say? Russ?
I have, yeah. So I'm a little confused around something, and if you could help me understand it, I'd appreciate it, and if not, that's okay too. So I understand through some of my own research that data centers are disproportionately built in low-income areas and communities of color.
See, I haven't done specific research looking at where data centers in Ohio are being sited. I do know that they are. A lot of the development that the planned development we're seeing is in rural communities, like agricultural communities. I don't know enough to say anything about the like community characteristics or socio-demographics of the surrounding communities, but I have seen, I mean, it's been a long ranging environmental justice concern about like industrial development and fossil fuel infrastructure siting decisions in general. There's also been an idea floating around to site data centers on brownfield sites, which I have my own concerns about, given what we know about like where those brownfield sites are located. Like those are certainly disproportionately prevalent in like Black and brown communities, low-income communities. So I think given everything that we know about the potential harms of data center development, I don't know if it's a responsible approach to be advocating to place them in sites that need pretty heavy investment in like remediation efforts. I can look into that a little more. We're doing a lot, or we're starting to build out some work around the brownfield issue. But it is hard to track like where some of these planned projects are going up because of the lack of like reporting and transparency around it. But I know that a lot of the local coalitions are tracking them. Like I've seen the most comprehensive map of planned facilities in Ohio that like some of the local organizers have created. So I'm happy to see if I can use that to have a better answer for you.
I've been told, and Jim, you can attest to this, he said it several times, that we just don't have the land within the city. Is there much of a push or an interest in having them in the county?
I mean, I know that there's a planned project in Conneaut. There's been a lot of, like I've heard some concerns from Conneaut residents, and I was just telling council member, I'm sorry, I don't know how to. Jane. This is my third time out here in a couple months, I think. So I think there are some plans underway potentially. I don't know about what other areas of the county are being considered.
Is Perry Ashtabula?
No, Perry's in Lake County.
That's
Yeah. The project that she speaks of, I believe it's in discussion. I don't know if it's actually, where it's actually moving along with, but in Conneaut, and I believe it's south of 90. So not many residential areas around where they're discussing this, but I believe it's actually, it's farmland, I think, which is a big concern,
I think
obviously
so,
taking
yeah.
over
Like it's
agricultural land out there.
It's becoming a big land use issue.
Yeah.
And like the idea of, farmland that's been in a family for generations being bought up by data center companies and making almost predatory offers to the landowners. And then like if someone does decide to sell their land, what does that mean for surrounding properties?
We heard anything about, somebody was telling me not too long ago that they've seen some of these bigger companies are now approaching like homeowners and stuff for, I guess you want to call them like mini data centers, saying, hey, we'll pay off your house, or whatever it might be, let us use your basement or let us put stuff in your garage. Have you seen any of that becoming more of a trend?
I have not seen anything or heard anything from any groups that we've been working with. Mostly, I've just heard like a few anecdotal stories about people being approached with like huge offers that are honestly really hard to turn down. And especially if nearby properties are being bought up, like how do you find that balance? Like, do you stay there and deal with all of the environmental impacts, the air quality impacts, knowing that your property value is probably going down quite a bit? I think it's putting a lot of Ohioans into a very tough situation.
I too have heard that that is a strategy. I liken it into divide and conquer. If they can't get large-scale pieces of land, that they will minimize or, individual properties to incentivize them, and that way you get to break it up. And some people who are in financial need will agree to it, and to me, it's a way of infiltrating, if you will.
Yep.
Okay, another question. Nobody else does. So, with our zoning code in the works, are there any points of intersection or any language or talk around the data centers in our zoning code?
Yeah, so I don't know how many more questions you have, but what I was gonna do is kind of give, well, I wanna make sure you have time to ask them, because I can talk about currently what we're doing for quite a while, and I don't wanna disrupt the meeting that way, but I was gonna kind of give you all a high level, like if a data center walked in tomorrow, what the process would be with our current zoning and what we hope to get to as we're finishing the master plan and doing the new zoning. So as Molly mentioned, we're in a great state right now where we have all this going on. We have the studying going on. We have updates coming to our zoning. So this is the opportune time to gather all that data and make sure what we put into the zoning is what we want the community to look like, not only for data centers, but for every other development that we have coming.
Behind the meter, that was the behind the meter.
Yeah, that term is actually not only used in data centers, but, excuse me. But when you have big manufacturers that come in that need a lot of power, on-site generation is because of the cost of utilities and, quite frankly, the difficulty working with utilities to get them to respond to needs of industry. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these self-generation coming on board.
And the interconnection queue, so the wait time for a data center to get connected to the grid can go on for several years. So because of, this is a race, we're starting to see more and more companies turn to behind the meter for their planned facilities. Also, with House Bill 15 that passed last year, kind of streamlining that process and making it easier for data center developments to get those projects approved. I think we've seen a huge surge, one in data center development and behind the meter at the same time.
More questions?
Yeah, so back to my bit of a confusion, in understanding that data center developers look for sort of low-income areas or local municipalities that have cheaper land and other benefits to them. How is it reconciled if local governments are attracted because they think there's a potential tax benefit, but on the other hand, they are applying for the tax abatement, which means they don't really get the full tax revenue? I'm having a hard time reconciling those two.
I mean, to be frank, we are too a bit, like it is kind of,
So,
it does make you wonder, like considering, and I mentioned a bit about the jobs before, like it is kind of raising municipal income taxes. Like, again, I've heard anecdotal evidence about the impacts for municipal income taxes, especially during the construction phase of these facilities or development, but also during operations. There might be more jobs than we are currently understanding, or that's kind of like the universal understanding of data center job creation. But I think local officials absolutely shouldn't be offering any form of like local property tax abatements to data center companies, especially when they're already getting so much from the state. And I didn't mention this in my presentation, but even if state lawmakers were to entirely eliminate the sales tax subsidy for data centers tomorrow, the mega companies like Amazon, which entered into these agreements back in 2014, when the exemption was first created, they're set to continue receiving benefits from that incentive package through 2055. Even if we fully eliminated it, we wouldn't be able to do anything that would be in violation of an existing contract. So Zach Schiller, our research director, who knows all things taxes, he's been digging into some other potential state revenue streams that we can be leaning on to at least recover some of the losses that we're seeing, like the tangible personal property tax that we don't have in Ohio has generated a pretty substantial amount of revenue for Loudoun County, Virginia, which is one of the biggest data center markets in the world. But the subsidies, I think we're seeing a lot of states kind of turn to try to rein those subsidies in, and I think that locals should be doing the same because the data center industry is one of the wealthiest and well-resourced in the world. So I don't think we should be giving up, what we could be funneling into more meaningful community benefits and critical public programs and services when I don't think that many of the tech execs necessarily need another handout.
Madam Chair, Ms. Holman, if I can kind of expound on it. I think a lot of this has to do with how new data centers are and everything that all of us municipalities are learning from them. Back when this all first started and the boom started, you get a company that walks in the door and says, hey, I want to invest $1 billion in your community by putting this up. There's going to be a ton of construction jobs and X, Y, and Z. Of course, communities are going to get real interested, and of course they're going to say, well, we are shopping this around, so they start laying out the incentives, right from go. I think what everybody has learned is a couple things. Number one, there's not a lot of jobs after the construction is done, so you're not going to gain a lot of income tax from it. And when county auditors or when properties are valued, and we had this issue when we were discussing this with the Petman project, even though that was a $500 million project, at the end of the day, the property was probably only going to be valued at about $5 to $6 million because it could only be a pig iron plant. In this situation, most of these are built to only be a data center, so it decreases the value that is eventually going to be put on it. So now you're giving a tax abatement with what you thought was a $1 billion project, and it could actually be valued at half that or even less. So I think communities now have learned that honestly, the income for a municipality is in the property tax in a project like this. And as has been stated, there's a lot of other ancillary things that may need to be built on the municipal cost to get that data center here. So I think probably in the last 6 months, you've seen a push away from a lot of those incentives, just because we're all learning.
This is almost a few years back, I think everybody heard about, like, with New York, and Amazon supposedly wanted to put, you know, a new facility there and, you know, create all these jobs. This is kind of the opposite of that, where, okay, if they're gonna bring you 5,000 jobs, 10,000 jobs, that's, because then you're gonna start getting all the tax
All
from
the
all that.
income, right.
But this one, okay, you give them the abatement, but now, all right, it created 20 jobs.
So I
You
can,
know,
I can,
and it doesn't offset.
right, and I can kind of, we've seen this boom in construction. So, you know, the last couple years, as we've been watching the income tax come in, remember, we had the tower built at the hospital, we had the hotel built, we had tons of construction going on. So we saw the income tax go up, and as you all remember, I kept on saying, guys, this is just a blimp, this isn't gonna be consistent, and now our income taxes come back down. So you will see that with the building of a data center, and they've seen that, and then when the jobs are done, they're done, and you go back down to your level. So I think that's where, again, we're all learning, you know, as far as the financing goes, what pieces are gonna be important to communities and not. So, and as Ms. Holman has said, personally, and I wanna make sure I'm on the record, because I just like to put all the facts out to you guys. Within the city of Ashtabula, I do not want to see a data center. We are working hard on our new master plan. We have many, many, many better uses for the land we have within our 9-mile radius of land in the city. We don't have 100 acres for a data center. And if somebody came in and said, I wanted 100 acres and I want to buy all this again, we have better uses for that. So if a data center walked in here tomorrow, it does fall under our conditional use within our zoning today, which means you would have to have at least one public hearing on it. And then the planning commission would actually decide whether or not that would go forward, and also put the conditions on the facility. So if they said, you know, at noon on Sundays, we want pink smoke to come out of the stack, that could be a condition that they put on the property. I mean, you really have the ability to tell it exactly what you want it to do through that conditional use process. As I mentioned, we're in a good time period here. I've said this, and I mean no disrespect by it, but I do think the moratorium is kind of ceremonial. I think it's just kind of doing what other communities are doing right now. And I say that because, as the solicitor's office has told us time and time again, you can't really put the moratorium in place unless you are planning to study whatever it is you're putting the moratorium on, and it's going to have an end to it. So, you know, as you know, September, we plan on bringing the master plan to council for approval, and we are working on zoning right now. We intend to have that probably within the first 6 months, 8 months of next year, which means this moratorium that we've written, because it is written in the way that once the study is done, the moratorium's over and it defaults to zoning. So I think the better conversation for us, because even if a data center walked in tomorrow, I don't think within 6 months we're gonna have what they need to get operating. I think the better conversation to have is, does it remain a conditional use? What of the new zoning land uses that we put into play, where would they go? And then what are the minimums that they would have to meet even to go for a conditional use? Should they be 2 miles from a residential property? And setting that, you know, is there even a place in the city that they could meet that standard? Limiting the size of it, limiting the amount of water they can use, limiting the amount of power they can use. If they're bringing in generated power, noise, the size of that generated power, add beneficial use back to the community. Can they supply power back to the grid, lowering everybody's energy taxes or energy costs? So there's, I think, a lot of things that we can do within the zoning that sets us up to be exactly what council, the administration, and the community want when it comes to data center. Personally, I think we make it as difficult as possible, almost impossible to do, because again, that's just my feeling. The next person that comes into our seats might feel differently, but, and the technology may change where, you know, they don't consume all the water and they don't need all the power and they don't, you know, we don't want to set ourselves up to miss out on an opportunity if it's not going to take up all the land and different things like that. But zoning can always change. But I think we are in a really great position right now to say exactly how we want not only this, but all industry to act when it comes into the city.
But having the moratorium forces us to go into the zoning discussion. Am I correct on that?
No, it's going to be in the zoning discussion anyways. It doesn't force it to, it just, all the moratorium does is say, no data centers until the zoning's done.
So with that, and I asked Molly at the beginning of this meeting, has she seen some good legislation that incorporates protections against some harms?
Mhm.
And if this is only to say no data centers, perhaps it needs to be developed so we can begin to talk about potential harms and what policies or guardrails need to be put in place to minimize those.
And that's as I said, that's the discussion I really want input on, is radius between neighborhoods, noise levels, light dispersion, how tall the building can be. New Albany is actually really innovative when it comes to their zoning. They actually make the data centers build so that there is a, I can't remember what they call it. So that if the data center folded up, another industry could use that building. The buildings are actually created so they can be something else, and they mandate that. Another interesting thing they do down there, they have, I think, over 15 million square feet of data centers. They have over 40 operating and 26 planned right now just in their community. But they take an average of their community in manufacturing of square footage and determine the amount of employees that are in that square footage. And they determine an average number of income that those employees get. And when the data center comes in with their square footage, they calculate, well, that should have 300 employees in there, and we're going to expect an income tax of X, even though that amount of employees are not working there. So there are a lot of things that we can do to make sure that it is a benefit to the city. Again, I don't want one, but there are a lot of things you can do, especially with the conditional use, to make sure that happens. What I would like to see is a minimum standard set by the zoning before you can even apply for a conditional use, and then those conditions make it even
More difficult?
not more difficult, but
Standards,
yeah, higher
standards.
standards that they have to meet,
Set some
Um,
expectations.
all of
And
that,
some
yes.
accountability.
Correct. One thing that was mentioned was wastewater, and you guys know, when Petman was coming here, they originally wanted to have their own wastewater treatment plant so they could discharge. I said, absolutely not. Run the pipe over to our facility, because I didn't want them self-monitoring. We could do the same thing, you know, in this situation, no standalone self-report that's coming to us, so that they can be in our industrial pretreatment program. We can do inspections on their property, plus the effects at the plant before it goes out to the lake. So there's a lot of things that, as a home rule community, we can put into place to make sure that those safeguards are in there. So the moratorium essentially basically just says, for now, you can't, but like I said, within 6 months, by mid-next year, it would be a moot point, because it would revert back to the zoning. And I think that's where the discussion has to be, is on that zoning part of it. But just so you know, if one walked in tomorrow, there are already rails in place, because our zoning mentions nothing about data centers. So it has to go through a conditional use.
So if we pass this moratorium through here, which then would go to council, then what I hear you saying is through the zoning, you're going to be addressing these other issues?
Regardless if you pass that moratorium or not, data centers will be addressed in the new zoning. My concern is from what we are hearing from economic development experts, there are unintended consequences in communities that are passing these data center moratoriums that are not reflective of the data center industry, but other industries looking to move.
What we haven't talked much about is some of their environmental justice issues. Ashtabula has its own list of health concerns, higher cancer rates and the whatnot. And I work with, some folks who talk about social determinants of health and how that's impacting some of our most vulnerable communities. What is some of the harm? I mean, what does it look like when these toxic chemicals are actually polluting our waters? I mean, I understand that there are guardrails that have some benefits to us, but we haven't talked about the negative impact that this might have. And I know people don't know yet because it's still relatively new, but I can't help but thinking about, what was that movie with Julia Roberts in it? What
Erin
was that movie?
Brockovich.
Erin, yeah.
Yeah,
Erin-
and she's actually taken on quite a role
Yeah,
in
I was
the data
just gonna
center
say,
industry
she's-
right now. Yes. Mhm.
She made a blog post about the Asheville Energy Center, which is an 800 megawatt natural gas behind the meter facility. But I just thought that was interesting that Erin Brockovich is on the case. I think, so with the water and the potential PFAS contamination, we don't have adequate regulations in place for PFAS contaminants. I know that the US EPA is working on setting maximum contaminant levels that like local public water systems will have to adhere to by, it was 2029. I think they've extended that, or they've enabled public water systems to apply for a 2-year extension. And they've also removed some of the PFAS that were included under that initial rule. I mean, PFAS contamination or exposure, like it can, if it is in our water supply or if it's in our soil that's being used to grow our food, like that can then accumulate in our organs and our bloodstreams and lead to like chronic long-term health conditions, higher incidences of cancer and liver disease. Like there's a whole range of health impacts that, won't show up immediately, but they definitely come with long-term consequences. Another thing that I didn't mention is the deployment of backup diesel generators. So a lot of data centers are building backup diesel generation that they can deploy during times like grid curtailment events or like times of high grid stress. I think the PJM has already ordered data centers with backup generation to kind of disconnect their load from the grid and deploy those backup diesel generators 3 times already this year. So the idea that these the backup diesel generators are far more harmful than even like the natural gas generation. They produce more like particulate matter and diesel particulate matter, which are also linked to chronic health conditions like respiratory or cardiovascular health conditions. And they also like lower air quality in the surrounding community and are producing carbon emissions that are linked to the climate crisis. So I think, I think it's also important to consider limits on backup diesel generators, like how often and how long they can be running per year. Because, and again, this is also anecdotal from someone that has worked with the US EPA before. They for some reason had a suspicion that those backup diesel generators would be deployed more than just during emergency circumstances, which I think we might be starting to see a little, just because our grid is not equipped to keep up with the surge in demand that we're seeing. Like already we're seeing more outages, higher electricity bills, and if we're enabling data center companies to just function off grid and like lower the air quality and create negative public health outcomes, like I think that's something that should be reined in a lot to protect like our health, but also like ratepayers from the skyrocketing energy bills that we're seeing. I ramble quite a bit, so
No, you're very interesting.
have another comment. So I was gone during the time, but a few years back, for you locals who have lived here, there was a time I know when the beach had such high bacteria levels, people couldn't swim in the water. Remember that? I remember that when I come back. So I'm curious as to, one, what caused that, and how long did it take to actually clean the waters up so that people could actually enjoy the beach again?
So most of the E. coli, it's usually E. coli that raises the levels in our beaches. And we tend to see that after there are large rain events, and that is because of sanitary sewer overflows, typically coming from the west, so coming from Lake County and even Cleveland, that the currents of the lake bring those waters to us. So if you know a lot about Cleveland and their wastewater system, they have invested billions of dollars in EQ basin type things like we have here in the city, where ours is 1 million gallons, theirs are hundreds of millions of gallons, where instead of that flowing out to the lake in an SSO, they're capturing it and keeping it back. So we haven't seen as many in recent years as we did back then, but most of that is due to the sanitary sewer overflows. And then I think it was in the, I'm not sure when this happened here where you couldn't swim on the beaches, but 60s.
In the 60s.
Okay, so 60s and 70s.
He changed colors.
So 60s and 70s, you were allowed to discharge directly to the lake. So sanitary sewer and storm sewer were the same. And it was in the 60s, 70s where those became separated. So that then also cleared up a lot of the lake from having the E. coli bacteria go into the lake. But we still do today, if typically you'll see a very large rain event and then 3 or 4 days later, our beach will test higher in E. coli. Or if it's been a very hot and very steady lake, usually ours is not affected, but Lakeshore Park, who doesn't get a lot of circulation because it's behind the break wall, they will test high for E. coli because the water's not moving.
Go ahead.
So that's why I was thinking, if we had that experience previously, how are we looking to plan to mitigate that from occurring again?
Well, and like I said,
I mean, from the, whatever toxins you
Oh,
mentioned.
yeah, those are different than what I'm talking about, the bacterias that I'm talking about. But again, I think it's important that large industries like that are not allowed to self-report, that there's an oversight. They don't get a permit to discharge.
So did everyone have a chance? Oh, go ahead.
Well, data center operators can apply for, I think it's the NPDES
Yes,
permit,
yep.
which is the wastewater discharge permit. The Ohio EPA was considering implementing rules that would create a general permit. So like a company could get kind of a blanket permit to discharge directly back to surface waters under the general permit. But they decided to not go through with that because there were thousands of public comments expressing opposition. So that at least adds, having it available at the facility level, like you might still have some concerns about that. Like if you would prefer them to be connecting to a public wastewater management system. But at least there's some harms have been mitigated by that recent decision.
Has everyone had a chance to read this? I think it was emailed out.
Given my new understanding that this may not have much impact because it's going to need to go to zoning anyways, and your comment about there are some potential gaps and that you have resources that we could look at to consider to make this a bit more robust. I know you don't want to continue to prolong this, but you know I'm an educator, so you know I want more information, and so I would rather gather some more.
You want more time on it?
I would rather not do it just as a ceremonial type thing that's not where, and then we come back and go, okay, like she said, there's other things that could maybe be added, and then we go, oh, this didn't do what we really wanted it to. If we're gonna do it, let's have that full impact. And like you said, we're gonna be looking at it anyways, so if we are gonna do something, maybe take a little extra time and include stuff, Molly can send some of that stuff over, and then we can implement that to have a more lasting effect on it.
Well, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm glad you brought this up, Ms. Holman, about more information. I would like you to hear about some of those unintended consequences from other industry. I don't know how true it is. I've just heard it more than once. And typically when you hear things more than once, twice, 3 times, there's some rationale to that. So there's a lot of information out there. As I mentioned to Mr. Giacomo, there have been some groups within the county that have visited New Albany to see how this works, and some of their data centers are next to $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 homes in subdivisions, but the requirements that they have down there for barriers and everything else is, it's, again, not advocating for them. I don't want them. I'm going to keep saying that because I know there are those obsessors of mine out there that will twist my words, don't want them in the city. But there are ways that if we have no choice to make sure that council's needs, the administration's needs, and the community needs are met so that they do as minimal or no harm to the community, which we should be shooting for no harm, and have a benefit to the city if one were to come along. But I say that because I'd like to set up, see if we can even get a tour down there. They do it often because they are kind of like Ohio's poster child for, I think they've been doing it since 2010 down there, so. But the expansion, the way these things, let's face it, whether we like data centers or not, we're all connected to them. It's not just AI, it's storage, it's your Office accounts, it's your Microsoft accounts, it's your Apple IDs, we're tied to them. That horse has left. I don't think AI and cloud-based storage is ever gonna not be here.
That train's going down the tracks, we're not stopping.
It's gone, the horse is out of the barn.
Like cooked spaghetti, you
yeah.
can't put it back in the box.
Exactly. So, but how we deal with it and how we go from here, I think is important. And the community input all throughout the country around data centers, I think has been very, very good and very robust. And I think the data centers see that and they're changing their processes. And as issues come up, people are changing their processes. And like I said, it may, someday not be 100 acres. We all know the first computer filled this room, and now, it's on the, tip of a pen that you can store that same amount of data. So, but we need to be prepared.
And like generally speaking, I'm not anti-data center. I'm not necessarily pro, but kind of what you've talked about, and you've brought this up with some of the community things, that it doesn't make sense in every area. There are going to be areas that it does make sense, and if you have the transparency, and if you have involvement from local leadership, in the best interest of the people, and again, not that Ashtabula is where it's going to make sense, but there may be other areas where it does make sense, and there's 50 boxes that need to be checked, and well, you know what, they check all of them. So maybe those areas it will work for, because again, we're not stopping it. It's happening. They have to go someplace, but it doesn't mean it has to be here.
Yeah.
And the places where they can check those boxes and get what they need from it, it can work.
And just to mention on the transparency end of things, not only my time as city manager, but my time even before this when I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, I've never once signed an NDA, and I don't intend to. And there have been projects where we've been asked to. I don't necessarily, especially in my public position, I don't believe in them. So again, that's just me, that's not the next guy, but.
So and this is not on the data center thing, with the non-disclosures, is that something that we as a council can pass something where the city manager is not, council members, city managers, any public employee is legally not allowed to sign those. One, it takes you off the hook, or whoever, that, hey, look, legally, I'm not allowed. But it also then gives that transparency to people knowing, well, they're not doing it. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's something that we could.
That would be a question for the solicitor. I would only, the situations where I could see it coming up, where I would consider it would be more on the negotiation of a price of something where, you know, people get real squirrely about talking publicly about the price they would offer for a property. Because there have been times, even though we haven't been asked to have a NDA, but where an owner of a property that we might have been interested in might give us one price, but if it was going on the open market, they would feel differently and sell it for a higher price. They don't want those kind of things disclosed. But again, I've never signed one to this point, and I don't. Petman was another project that everybody could have and nobody did, so.
Catherine, do you have thoughts on that?
Not yet.
If council would like to ask for legal advice, I would suggest that they do that under attorney-client privilege.
As individuals, but not as a council. But your question was all city employees?
I would think, you know, city employee, or elected officials, you know, or whoever would have to, you know, be involved, whoever we felt needed that, you know.
And I think there are a lot of considerations outside of this discussion that need to be taken into account. Public records, open meetings, all those things sort of dovetail together. So that would be something that I would like to research and prepare under privilege. And then if council chooses to waive that privilege, that would be up to them.
It's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all.
No.
Exactly.
Okay, so, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You can be freed, because we have a few more things to go over, but we appreciate all, I feel like my brain grew 3 sizes today.
That's only the half of it.
Yeah, I know. I saw what you were skipping through.
Well, you're welcome to come back for the next half.
I definitely will follow up with some resources, and like I said, we have a group that we're working with that's building out a plan, like a toolkit for local communities. Governor Shapiro put out a local toolkit. Like, there are a bunch of those resources kind of floating around, so I can compile some and happy to.
You can email them to us?
Yeah,
That
definitely.
would be great.
May
Thank
I
you.
also ask specifically if you have anything about community benefit agreements? We'd love to take
Yeah,
a look at that.
definitely. Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services has a lot of great resources on community benefits agreements and
You said that fast. Fair Shake.
environmental legal services. That's right. And I will follow up in writing with that. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach, too, and safe travels home.
Zach says hi, by the way.
All right, so moving on. Do you have a city manager report?
Madam Chair, I don't, other than just a couple quick highlights. I think the last bits of concrete were poured today on the Main Avenue sidewalk project. The lights are up. Hopefully those are going to be turned
I
on
was
here.
going to say, are they working?
I don't think they've been turned on yet, so just, you know, making all the final connections there. In front of Soiree, we had a little basement issue there, so there's still an area that needs to be finished up over there. We're working with the owner on that. So things are coming along really, I don't know why that long. Things are coming along really well with that project, and we should be on time. Some of the buildings that received the facade money have been, their work has been going on those. So we've had some roofs done, we've had some facades done. Chrissy Tobias' salon is probably the best example. She's done a lot to that building. They got going very quickly on that building. So really excited about that. Collins Boulevard, as I mentioned at the last council meeting, work continues there. We're working on some sidewalk issues on that. And then most of you know there was an incident today on the Center Street overpass. There were rumors flowing around that the bridge collapsed. It was not the structural parts of the bridge, but it was a railing that was up on the most western bridge. There are two bridges over there. The western bridge actually does not have any train traffic, and the tracks have actually been removed from it. It was an old spur that went into some of the factories that used to be along that stretch, going back into like Jefferson Avenue and things like that over in that area. Again, all speculation. Our police department is looking into it, but there was a semi truck coming down the road at the time who witnessed what he thought was 3 to 4 kids up on that bridge who may have played a part in that. Personally, if it was kids, if it was not kids, there's no way that a railing should have been able to be pushed over a bridge that's attached to the bridge. I will say Norfolk Southern responded immediately to our calls about this, and I did receive a call from our government liaison who's in Atlanta right before the meeting here. We have been working with them and advising them about the condition of that bridge for quite some time, actually going back to November. As you know, I mentioned this before, this was part of our municipal bridge inspection, so I sent them all the reports. They have been working on plans to replace that bridge, and we're hopeful that the one that is not being used, they also address that at the time as well. It sounds like they will have some final plans sometime in late September, and then construction, hopefully, they have to put it out for bid and everything like that. But Norfolk is also the company doing the replacement of the bridge over the Ashtabula River. So they are investing in the community. Again, they have been extremely responsive. We don't get this type of response from CSX. We will continue to follow up with them, because if they are going to, if they are making those plans to replace the bridge, which it sounds like they're in development right now, there are some things with our storm drains and sewer lines that are in that area that, as long as they're doing that, we need to take a look and make sure that our assets are good there too. So stay tuned on that. We will keep you posted.
I have a question. You mentioned the sidewalk in front of Soiree. Is that the reason why it's all broken and
Yeah,
what?
it's still the original sidewalk there. So what we had found, even though we sonared the whole area and did some probing, their basement actually extended out in the right of way. So when their basement actually extended out into the right of way. So that's a no-no, but a lot of the basements back in the day did. A lot of them were filled in during urban renewal. This one was not. So we're working with them to move that wall back, move some plumbing, fill that void in, and then be able to lay the sidewalk.
Concrete.
Yeah, so that's why no work has continued in that area right now. Yeah, but it will all match when it's done. And then the paving project is well underway. They did find some sub-base issues that they had to repair on cladding, and I want to say on Dunsmore. So they did put the intermediate course down on most of the roads. I think all of them were completed. However, on Dunsmore, because we've identified an area that we want to explore, they will be cutting out a patch and digging down to make sure that there's no other issues there. But typical in these projects and with the age of our roads, that there is some sub-base work that has to be done. So.
Any questions for the manager? No? All right, I'm going to read the Parks and Recreation report. Mr. Dibble was not able to be here tonight, so it's going to sound weird because it's in his writing, and I'm here, but I'll just start it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding a couple initiatives the Park and Recreation Board has begun exploring. We believe council could enhance both community pride and economic activity within the city of Ashtabula. The first is the City of Ashtabula Hometown Heroes banner program. At our July meeting, we welcomed Ashtabula Township trustee Bambi Paschal, who presented the township's successful Hometown Heroes banner program. Their program has become a source of tremendous community pride, honoring veterans throughout Ashtabula County while creating an attractive streetscape. Our board discussed the possibility of developing a similar program for the city. One advantage unique to the city is that our newly installed decorative downtown light poles are city-owned. That could allow us to begin a pilot program downtown without many of the utility restrictions encountered elsewhere. As the program grows, it could eventually expand into other areas of the city. We also discussed supporting local businesses whenever possible by utilizing local printers and suppliers, developing an online application process to simplify participation, and encouraging sponsorships through the veterans organizations, civic groups, businesses, and service clubs. Beyond honoring veterans, we also discussed the potential to recognize first responders, including police officers, firefighters, EMS personnel, and dispatchers. The goal is much larger than simply hanging banners. It is about creating visual appeal, encouraging people to visit downtown, recognizing those who have served our community and our country, and fostering civic pride. The second initiative involves programming our parks, particularly Cornelius Park. For years, Walnut Beach has successfully hosted summer concerts. The board discussed expanding similar programs into Cornelius Park, including concerts, community movie nights, food trucks, and family-oriented events. Programming parks brings people downtown. When families attend concerts or movie nights, they do not just visit the park. They stop for dinner, buy ice cream, shop in local stores, and experience our downtown business district. Those events also naturally discourage vandalism and undesirable activities by increasing positive public use for our parks. As we discussed during our meeting, active parks became safer parks. The board believes Cornelius Park has tremendous untapped potential as a gathering place for families and visitors while complementing existing downtown events rather than competing with them. These discussions are still in an exploratory stage. No formal recommendations have been made yet regarding funding or implementation. However, we believe that these concepts align well with city goals of economic development, downtown revitalization, tourism, and community engagement. As we continue developing these ideas, we look forward to working collaboratively with this committee, city administration, the Ashtabula Downtown Development Association, veteran organizations, and other community partners. Together, we have the opportunity to create projects that honor our history, strengthen our community, and bring more people into our parks and downtown businesses. Finally, you may have noticed the flowers and veterans in Cornelius Parks have really taken off and blossomed. These were born from our partnership with ATEC Horticulture Program under the direction of Mr. Ken Noble and his students. These plants were installed in time for Memorial Day and have really taken off to beautify the parks. In addition, the permanent cenotaph markers for recent Ashtabula honoree Civil War Medal of Honor recipient Isaiah Hayes and Montford Point Marine and Congressional Gold Medalist Linnell Moore have arrived and will be installed at Veterans Park shortly. So as you can see, our Parks and Recreation Board is very active in working on improvements that our city and residents can take pride in. That's it. Do we have any new business? We already discussed the moratorium.
Question.
Sure.
A few months ago with council, we talked about, the unhoused.
Right.
Where are things with that? And I'm wondering, I did hear some comments about Cornelius Park and, it's not the pergola, I call it a pergola, but what's the gathering?
Gazebo.
Gazebo.
Gazebo, yes. How is that coming along?
That's probably a question for you, Jim.
I'm sorry, what was, how is that, what was
They're
that?
coming along, there were
Oh,
questions and
yeah.
comments about the unhoused and families not feeling safe and comfortable with children and all that stuff.
Sure. And that's where one of our discussions during the last park board meeting where we talked about programming the park. So this, I think it was this week, they did have an event in the park.
Signature.
Yes,
band.
yeah, it was well attended, a lot of people around. We did not have any issues at that time, so that's one of the things with programming the park we want to see happen. As I had mentioned to council before, there was a, for lack of a better term, a sweep of the Gulf in the township side that forced a lot of people back into the city and then up Tannery Hill, and why you have seen kind of a more folks walking around Main Avenue and gathering in the park. This was done with zero coordination with us. And when we go into the park to do these sweeps, we bring along Signature Health, Brightview, the hospitals, Glen Bay, all of the partners to try to get people some help, not just move along into the city and let the city deal with it kind of tactic. And actually at our cleanup in South Park, I think I surprised Jane with a person that we have really, all agencies have had encounters with. Residents would 100% know who this person is, who actually showed up to volunteer and looks great.
Are we allowed to
received the-
say or not? I mean,
I
her
wouldn't-
picture,
Yeah,
her
I would not.
pictures
Her
are in
pictures,
my-
yeah, go look at the website. You don't recognize her, but,
there were other people that also helped, but when because I asked people if I'm gonna take
Yeah.
a picture,
Right,
if I can
right.
be on, and some were like, no, but we did have people that were helping.
yeah. And so, yes, it takes a long time. And I know people are frustrated by how long it takes, but the help that we are providing does work if somebody's willing to do the process. So, I think we're probably at a point, midway almost through the summer now as school starts up, to have the task force that's been dealing with homeless come back in and give you another report of the
That's
things
what
that they've
I
seen.
think we really want
I don't know
that.
if we want to do that here or do it at council.
I think at council would
okay.
be you agree, council?
Well, I'm thinking the amount of, with the way our new structure is, we get a lot done. There might not be the time during that to do it. This might be a good forum to have them come and report. Or
Okay,
we could
do
report
that.
at safety forces too. It just,
They can, well, here,
wherever.
this is.
Here at least it's televised, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, they can do that.
Sometimes it's a little better too to give us the info and then we just, so that way people don't start sidetracking them, maybe even at like a council meeting.
Right.
They don't necessarily get sidetracked, if they can tell us what we need to know and then just deliver it, Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they can tell us here
Right.
and then we can deliver,
Yeah.
the information.
Yeah, I was happy to set that up whenever you'd like. So
Okay. We'll talk.
we can discuss that, yep. 'Cause I
Announcement.
think the other thing that you would like, Ms. Holman, is the revisit of the tax abatement. So I think we talked about that possibly in September or October. That's up to you as well. Just let me know.
And with that, you and I have talked about that in the past too. If you want me to, like I told you, just reach out and
Sure.
I can,
We have some ideas.
Can I make an announcement?
Yeah.
When's our next meeting?
September 2nd.
Ooh, so, the Beulah Movie Club is having the Movies in the Park, at West 38th Street Park. They had to postpone the last one because we had the smoke from the
Yeah.
Canadian wildfires. So the new date is August 14th, 2026, from 7 to 11. The movie starts at 9 p.m. And the movie, it's a goofy movie, so it's fun for the kids and families.
Yeah, perfect. Is there anything else? Any unfinished business, new business? No? All right, September 2nd, thank you. Thank you for coming. I thought you were going to say something. No?
Where are you from?
Local 18, operating engineers.
Oh,
Here's his card.
okay, cool, thank you.
All right, that's it.
You came in from Cleveland?
Actually, I left Palm